back to the Hill Update. I'm your host, Dean House, Member of Parliament for Niagara West. Joining me on the show today is Franco Terrazzano, who is the Federal Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Before working at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco worked as an economic policy analyst with the Calgary Chamber of Commerce and as a fellow with the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Franco is a Master's of Public Policy and a Bachelor of Arts in Economics degrees from the University of Calgary. Franco, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So listen, tell us a bit about the Canadian Taxpayers Federation just very quickly. I guess you're in every province. What's the size of your membership? And just tell us a bit more about the organization.
Yeah, we have 235,000 supporters across the country. We're a very scrappy, nonpartisan advocacy group that fights for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government.
Excellent. Well, listen, I want to talk a bit about carbon tax and stuff, but let's look at this video first, and then we'll get right into the conversation.
Prime Minister likes to talk about austerity. Well, I think that the Bransfield family of four in Calgary can tell him all about austerity, because that's what they're living right now because of his housing hell, his carbon taxes, and his inflation. They said, close quote, "We're having to choose between paying a bill or getting food, and that can be really hard. It makes things really difficult. And I just don't see an end in sight. Will the Prime Minister accept our common sense plan to axe the tax, fix the budget, build the homes so that the Bransfield family and so many others can eat, heat, and house themselves?"
Okay, so the carbon tax has just gone up to $60 a ton, or $80 a ton, sorry, and it's going to go up continuously to $170 a ton. So why is the carbon tax so detrimental in terms of dealing with people day to day? What are you hearing?
Oh, it's such a bad tax, and it adds so much pain for Canadians. And the reason that it's such a harmful tax, it's so painful, is that it taxes the necessities of life, right? So someone who has to fuel up their sedan to get to work, or to pick up their kids from school, or to take them to soccer practice, well, you're paying more to fuel up that car, to drive to work, to take the kids to soccer practice. When you have to stay warm during the winter months, well, the carbon tax makes that more expensive to heat your home with natural gas. Or when you got to go to the grocery store to pick up food to put in your family's fridge, well, the carbon tax makes that more expensive as well, because the carbon tax taxes the farmer, it taxes the trucker, and that's why it also makes it more expensive for families to buy the food at the store. So why is the carbon tax so damaging to so many Canadians right now? Because it makes the necessities of life more expensive.
So you talk about farmers for a second, and that's one of the things that I know there's a private members bill out there right now, C-234. I know you're very familiar with it. Let's just talk a bit more about, why that actually puts the price of food up.
Well, because right now, right, the carbon tax is applied on the natural gas and the propane that farmers use to dry their grain and heat their barns, right? And the carbon tax will cost Canadian farmers $1 billion by 2030. So obviously, when you make it more expensive for Canadian farmers to grow food, you make it more expensive for Canadians to buy food. But not just that, right? Those truckers who got to fill up those big rigs with diesel, well, the carbon tax makes that more expensive. So when you make it more expensive for truckers to deliver the food, you make it more expensive for Canadians to buy food. So at the end of the day, the carbon tax makes it more expensive for farmers to grow food, makes it more expensive for truckers to deliver food, and makes it more expensive for Canadians to buy food.
One of the things that there was I guess it wasn't a secret report, but there was a report that the budgetary officer did for the party talking about this effect on the actual Canadian economy. Any thoughts on that? I mean, that's another thing that we need to consider. I believe that number is around $30 billion a year as it fully gets ramped up. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's gonna put about a $30 billion hole in the Canadian economy in 2030. This year, the carbon tax is costing the Canadian economy $12 billion. Right? So not only is it making the necessities of life more expensive, it's also chasing away investment and making it harder for Canadians to have good paying jobs. And you know what's just the cherry on top, or maybe I should add or say adding insult to injury, is that the vast majority of countries around the world do not have a national carbon tax. If you look at World Bank data, well, about 70% plus of countries around the world do not have a national carbon tax. And that includes, 3 of the 4 largest emitting countries in the world, like the United States, like Russia, and like India. So not only are you chasing away investment from Canada with the carbon tax, but you're making it harder for businesses to grow. You're making it harder for Canadians to afford the necessities, all while the vast majority of countries around the world are not punishing their citizens with these types of national carbon taxes.
That's a great point. And, at the end of the day, we are importing those goods and people are able to buy them cheaper from other countries. When we come back, though, there's another tax that just was talked about before we finish Parliament that I want to get into when we come back for break.